All right, so welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And this time we're looking into some pretty serious allegations against Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah.
You guys sent in quite a few sources this time. We got a video summary, some key highlights, and then also some insights. And I gotta say, I'm really, really curious to dig into this. I mean, we're talking about charges, like human trafficking, extortion,
Right.
even things like transportation for prostitution.
Yeah, this is this is a lot more than just your average celebrity scandal.
Right.
I mean, these charges are they're incredibly serious. The potential consequences here are huge.
And, according to these sources, he's actually in custody awaiting trial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that trial's coming up in May 2024, so not that far away.
Right.
But the sources also detail some really disturbing accusations.
Yeah, it's important, I think, for us to understand the weight of these accusations, especially the human trafficking allegations. I mean, if those are proven, we could be talking about a really significant prison sentence. I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on this as you're looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy stuff, for sure. And we're not just talking about one isolated incident here.
Right.
The sources highlight multiple lawsuits, and they're all filed by anonymous victims. And all these lawsuits, they all describe a deeply troubling pattern of behavior.
Yeah, and that's right. Each of these lawsuits detail some pretty disturbing accounts of being drugged and sexually assaulted at these parties, and they were hosted by Diddy.
Wow.
And this consistency across multiple accounts, that really stands out, and it's something that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that these people are choosing to come forward,
Yeah.
despite the potential risks and the likely trauma that they've endured.
It's amazing. It takes an incredible amount of courage.
Absolutely, and their bravery, could potentially inspire a ripple effect throughout the whole entertainment industry, right? Imagine if this encourages others to come forward and speak out against similar situations.
Yeah.
It has the power to shift the entire landscape of accountability.
That's a really good point.
Not just for Diddy, but for any
Yeah.
powerful figure across the industry. I mean, this case could be a real watershed moment.
Now, while he is in custody awaiting trial, he and his legal team have consistently denied all the charges.
No.
And they're meticulously preparing for this upcoming trial. And I know you mentioned it earlier, but it is coming up really quickly. In fact, there was even a mention of him having knee surgery recently and briefly leaving jail to recover
Oh, interesting.
before going back into custody. So,
Yeah, that's pretty standard legal strategy
Yeah.
in cases like this. You're going to see the defense focus on discrediting the accusations, highlighting any inconsistencies that they can in the victim's accounts,
right.
and relentlessly emphasizing that Diddy is innocent until proven guilty, which of course is the foundation of due process.
Right, and I understand that due process is vital, but it's hard to ignore this one detail that I found that's not even in the source material. But Diddy actually posted on social media about his knee surgery, and then the post vanished. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly possible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a world where social media shapes public opinion so quickly. And every little thing you post becomes part of the story.
Yeah.
So his legal team may have advised him to control his online presence, especially with how sensitive this situation is. And, it might feel like a small thing,
Yeah.
but it could play into the overall narrative around the case.
It makes you wonder, what else might be happening behind the scenes and
Yeah.
how much of what we see is deliberate.
Absolutely. And this all kind of brings us to the upcoming trial,
Okay.
which is scheduled for May 5th, 2024.
Wow, that's coming up quick.
I know.
And I imagine it's going to be a huge event. I think a lot of people are going to be watching this.
Oh, yeah, both the media and the public. I mean, this is going to be big.
What makes this case even more complex, though, is that we're dealing with these allegations that date back to the 1990s and the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
So that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what kind of challenges do you think the prosecution might face?
Well, I mean, the passage of time can be a huge hurdle in these types of cases.
Yeah.
Memories fade, witnesses become harder to track down, and evidence, it might be lost or degraded over time. I mean, proving these allegations after so many years it's going to require a really meticulous and strategic approach.
And on top of those challenges, we can't underestimate the potential impact of
I know.
public interest, right?
Yeah.
And media scrutiny. I mean, this story, it's already generated a lot of attention.
Right.
And, that can influence everything from the jury selection process to the final verdict.
It really can.
How do you think the media coverage is going to play into this?
It's tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because the court of public opinion and the legal proceedings, they kind of run parallel, even though they shouldn't. And we've seen this over and over, where media coverage really shapes how the public sees things, and then that can potentially even influence the outcome of the trial.
Yeah.
So it will be really interesting to see how the court navigates all of that in this case.
It's definitely a multifaceted case, but I think it's important to step back for a second and remember the core issue here. I mean, these are really serious allegations, potentially life-changing consequences for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And regardless of what the trial's outcome is, this whole situation is making us face some really difficult questions.
Yeah.
About power, about accountability, and about the culture within the entertainment industry. This case may just expose a much bigger problem than any of us realize.
That's a great point. And actually, on that note, I think it's a good place to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're at a crossroads here.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, this is already making us think about some pretty unsettling questions about power dynamics, especially in an industry like this.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too,
Yeah.
When you brought up the potential ripple effect this case could have, it seems like, we are kind of seeing this shift in how society views these types of allegations.
Yeah.
Do you think this case could be a real turning point in terms of holding these powerful people accountable?
I think it definitely has the potential to be. There's this growing intolerance, I think, for abuse of power.
Yeah.
And a stronger push to hold those in positions of authority responsible for their actions.
Yeah.
And I think this case, especially with all the media attention it's getting, could really amplify that whole movement.
It makes you wonder, how this is going to impact Diddy's legacy.
Right.
Regardless of what the verdict is. I mean, he built this whole empire on charisma and success.
Yeah.
But these accusations, they cast a really long shadow.
It's a big question here, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile a public image built on success with such serious allegations? We've seen these kinds of situations play out before with other high-profile people.
Yeah.
And the court of public opinion, it can be so swift and unforgiving. Yeah. And the stain of these allegations, it can be really hard to erase.
It's not just his personal reputation at stake here either, right?
Well, I get it,
he's a brand, He's a cultural icon.
Yeah.
Think about what this could do to his businesses, his endorsements.
His influence, his
overall influence.
Yeah, right, yeah.
This trial could really send shockwaves through the whole industry.
It could. It really could force a much-needed reckoning, I think, making everybody kind of reassess how power is used and how these types of allegations are handled.
So trying to look ahead here a little bit. How do you think this trial might impact the music industry specifically?
Okay.
Or even just society as a whole?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think it's safe to say that this whole thing represents a turning point.
Yeah.
This is a moment of truth, not just for Diddy, but for the systems that maybe, allowed these situations to happen for so long.
I feel like we're witnessing this kind of shift in culture.
I think so.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's this growing awareness and just this refusal to tolerate this type of behavior.
I agree. And this trial, with all the media attention, all the public scrutiny, could really be a major catalyst for that cultural shift.
Yeah.
It's like this moment where we're being forced to confront uncomfortable truths and just demand more accountability from the people we've put on a pedestal.
But it's also a reminder that the path to justice can be really long and complicated. These allegations are about events that supposedly happened decades ago.
Right.
And navigating that in a legal context it's got to be challenging.
It will be, without a doubt. This trial, it's just one chapter.
Right.
In this much larger story.
Yeah.
And the effects of this on Diddy, on the victims, on the music industry, they're going to unfold for years to come.
It is kind of a sobering thought, but it also shows how significant it is to speak up.
Right.
To seek justice.
Yeah.
Even when it seems impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think this says about the power of
Yeah.
speaking truth to power?
It reminds us that even though it's difficult,
Yeah.
it's essential to keep pushing
Yeah.
for accountability, for change.
Mm-hmm.
It's a testament to the courage of the people who come forward
Mm-hmm.
despite all the risks. And it shows us how important it is
Yeah.
to believe survivors and to create a culture where they feel safe and empowered to share their stories.
I agree. And, we've been diving deep into these allegations,
Yeah.
exploring some really heavy, complex topics.
Mhm.
And it's a stark reminder that behind all the glamour
Right.
and the excitement of the entertainment world,
Yeah.
there are real people whose lives are deeply affected by what happens.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that human element
Yeah.
at the heart of all of this.
Right.
We're not just talking about headlines and legal battles.
Right.
We're talking about real lives
Yeah.
that have been forever impacted by what's going on. And as we wait for this trial,
Right.
we're left with more questions than answers,
Right.
Like, how is this going to affect Diddy's legacy?
Yeah.
Will justice be served?
Mm.
What lasting changes will this bring
Mm-hmm.
to the music industry and beyond? Yeah, those are all questions that, we're going to be thinking about a lot
Yeah.
in the months to come.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you're thinking about them too as we go through all this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Feels like with every layer we peel back, there's another layer of complexity.
Right.
Earlier we were talking about Diddy's deleted social media post about his surgery.
Yeah.
And it might seem insignificant, but it makes you think about, like, the power of image management today,
It's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, that little detail, that deleted post, it really says a lot about how much control public figures can have
Yeah,
over their own narrative.
exactly. Makes you wonder how much of what we see in the media or on social media is, like, carefully orchestrated
Oh, yeah?
to get a certain reaction,
Absolutely.
And in a case this sensitive with such serious allegations, I mean, controlling that narrative becomes even more important.
It's a high-stakes game, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Every move, every statement, it's all calculated
Right.
to try to influence how the public sees things.
Right.
And potentially, how things play out legally.
Yeah. But with all this, like, strategizing and image control,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember the real people at the heart of this story.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
can't forget about the alleged victims
Mhm.
and how much this is impacting their lives.
Yeah, their voices so often get lost in all the noise
Yeah.
around a big case like this.
Right.
And it really just highlights the power imbalances,
Yeah.
And it emphasizes how important it is to make sure that their stories are heard
Yeah.
and believed.
Well, this deep dive has definitely been intense
It has.
and eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah.
We've covered some really complex issues.
Mhm.
We've confronted some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
It's been a lot to process,
It has.
but it feels important
And
to
plus,
have these
it's
conversations.
essential. I mean, these cases, these stories, they have the power to challenge the way things are
Right.
and force us to really look at how we see power, accountability, justice,
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final question to think about. How do you think this case, no matter what the outcome is, will ultimately impact Diddy's legacy? I mean, will he be remembered as a music icon, or will these allegations just kind of overshadow everything?
That's a question that each person's going to have to answer for themselves.
Yeah.
But what we do know is this case it's left a mark,
Yeah.
not just on Diddy's life, but on our culture as a whole.
Right.
It's a conversation that will keep going long after everything's settled in court.
Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us on this deep dive. We covered a lot today.
We did.
And I hope it's given you some things to think about, some new perspectives. And remember, there's always more to explore, more to learn, and more to discuss. Until next time.